Hello and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Talk. I think it's episode 6 now. My name is Steve Corwood.
And I'm Nick McDonald.
And this week we're going to be covering Cazoo, Carzam, and how much does it cost for you to acquire a customer and knowing your costs in terms of doing a deal. Right, Nick. Big news this week coming down. Everyone's ranting and raving. Cazoo, Carzam. Cazoo has announced that actually to its shareholders that it may never, ever make a profit. What do you make of that?
I think I'm less surprised than a lot of people. I don't think the shareholders will be too happy about it and the investors. But it's been started as a tech company. You know, it's a company to sell shares to other people for more than the shares they bought them for. It's very, very far away from what we're all used to, you know, in the used motor trade. It looks like a used car dealer, but that's not really how they're operating.
Yeah, and I don't think they've approached the market understanding used car dealers or being a used car dealer as such.
Well, used car really.
Yeah. And then we look at the costs that are involved. And I think we were speaking just before we came on then. What did you say that they were reporting of a profit? Well, not a profit per unit. Let's get this right. This is one of the things that needs to be, you know, disclosed properly and why they are making, you know, a lot of the loss that's in there.
I think these are rough figures, and I've slept since then. But I shared a post on a social media group last week, and there was a lot of engagement on it. The article was saying, I think they've improved there, and it wasn't profit per unit, it was margin. And I'm going to pull a figure out of it, £225, let's say. I don't think it was far away from that. But that's margin, not profit per unit. And now we will get onto this later about understanding the difference between margin and profit per unit, you know, because I think people do get them confused. But like with the value of their overheads, marketing spend, sites, acquisition costs, for instance, paying off what they've bought, you know, Imperial for, it's not surprising they're not going to make a profit. And what I would question is, I know they've came out previously and said we want to make £3,000 a unit margin, or that might have even been profit per unit, which they'll never get to. But I don't think the way they've set the business up, even if they made £1,000 margin or £1,300 margin, they still won't break even.
No, and that's coming down to what really, you know, it's difficult for any company, small or large, but with Cazoo's instance, you know, they floated on the New York Stock Exchange. I think it's $7 billion. So what's that? Just over $5 billion in sterling. And then to deliver this news to the shareholders that they may never make a profit, surely some questions have got to be asked, and where the money's being spent. You know, we keep seeing, you know, we're straight out the gates, and this is where it comes down to where is actually the profit per unit coming from, especially from a marketing spend. You know, Everton, Aston Villa, you know, I think the Everton deal was 9 million a year. Apparently that's been pulled away now. World Snooker Championships, you know, the list can go on and on and on. We see obviously TV advertising is a big part for a big brand, you know, not so much for us smaller guys that are, you know, we have to try and find the gaps where we can to try and find what we can in terms of traffic. But it's continuing on top of that news. And it sounds like they, you know, they raise that valuation with the hope of going into Europe and taking that by storm as well. And we know that in Europe, people don't change the car anywhere near as quickly as we do in the UK. Do you reckon there could be a steward's inquiry about where it's got to from where it was pitched in the first instance?
There is always that possibility. I'm guessing, given their experience, that their pack when they did the IPO would be pretty strong. And ultimately it was based on projections. I think to bring it back to the real world, and we know this happens a lot, if people want to start a little car dealership, they'll often know the local trader who's got plenty of money. He's an older fella, and he'll I'll put some money into your business, and he invests it, but he makes sure it's linked to stock. He makes sure that he knows what's going on in that business, even if he's not there all the time. And he's got experience in that market. The investors into this, a lot of them are just probably pension funds, our money probably being put in. And it's just another fund that didn't work out. And as long as, they get their bonus, the fund manager, who really cares? And it just doesn't sit right with me. Maybe I've just not worked in that corporate world, but it just doesn't sit right with me that money can be thrown around and wasted like that when you've got real car dealers and also real families facing cost of living crisis and trying to do an honest day's work to make an honest day's profit.
Yeah, well, we look at it as in, we're small businesses. We both run small businesses. And, we have to try and control the costs. It's tough, it's tough when you're pushing in a direction. It's, we're talking from experience. Sometimes it can all get lost in translation and you forget where you're going back to, which is what we'll come on to in terms of these acquisitional costs. And we're all guilty of it, but ours is on a different scale. And a lot more caretaking. I think if you were a shareholder, if anyone had their money in there now and looking at they own a share of that business and seeing where it's being spent, I think that's one of the worrying things. And then, it's sort of backed up as well now. If you look at, the recent announcement with Carzam, I think they had 112 mil. And from what I read, they were finding it very difficult to find the next buyer or, the next round of funding. I know some people have walked away from there, from Carzam. But where do you think it leaves them as well? So we've got, is there any coming back for, say, Cazoo and Carzam?
Am I right in thinking that Carzam's a private company still?
I think so. I don't know. It's not. It's definitely not IPO'd.
Different sometimes. So buying public shares, often with an investment vehicle, is very different from a group of investors who's, it's probably closer to being their money, putting it in and understanding the business model. And it seems like the IPO from Cazoo was almost premature. And maybe you're maybe right. They already knew that it wasn't going to work out, but that was the way of getting their shares cashed out.
Yeah. One thing it has done, in fairness, is made the industry sort of get up to speed with online and digital and the ability to deliver to people's door or click and collect. We can
some appetite for that. There's clearly some people who want to do that. The argument sometimes is, did those customers need to acquire those cars as cheaply as they did at the expense of proper motor traders trying to do a proper job profitably within the laws of the land, when the customer would have paid a few £100 more? It shouldn't be this race to the bottom. And, part of it seems like the advertising was to take market share, obviously, but also they wouldn't care less if 1,000 car dealers go out of business at their expense.
No, not
losses to do that.
Yeah, not at all. They've made it very difficult for us smaller guys that are trying to do the best job that we can. And it's made it difficult for a lot of people to see the route forward. And obviously there's continued things that everybody has to look at. But, coming back down to basics and what we sort of getting into with this is, knowing acquisitional costs. So this isn't the margin that you make per unit. So this is the profit per unit. And the Cazoo and Carzam and, scenario in particular, let's say Cazoo, reporting what they're reporting is sort of give us the hint to say, well, actually, let's understand how we work out and we get to what an acquisitional cost is, because I think there's still a lot of people out there that don't know the actual true acquisitional cost to do a deal. So by that meaning is your marketing spend. Well, the simple formula is how much you spend on marketing to get yourself a deal done. Now we know there's other factors, Nick, that can impact you making a better profit per unit as well. But do you think that one of the smarter plays for especially us smaller guys is to try and understand that PPU type model?
I think it's important to know all your numbers. And, you know, before we get away from these big guys, what's interesting on the Cazoo article, especially the one last week, is that the numbers are all laid out for everyone to see. And when you start looking at them, you start picking out key things that stand out as a problem. And, you know, a lot of people commented on those posts like, oh, wow, look at that number or look at that number. And if you did it for your own business, you know, you wouldn't, I'm hoping you wouldn't have that same horror story, but you'd look at certain things and go, where can I improve that? Where can I make that better? Because you don't want to be a busy fool, and you could be making £1,000 a unit margin, but then you might only be making £200 profit per unit and selling 20 cars, and you've got £4,000 after you've paid. All right, that's not, you know, just acquisitional cost, but, you know, if you're making that actual net profit per unit, you've made £4,000 in a month. Do you want to do everything you do for £4,000 a month?
That's the debate all the time, isn't it? And I think on the flip side of that, if you can understand where they're at, I mean, sometimes, you know, the reality of the situation is that we're guilty of it as well. You know, we've spent big in some marketing areas and learned a hell of a lot while we've done it, and not everything's been successful, but it's not successful in a way that you know, you don't get the reward that you want out of it. You actually get to learn about what does and doesn't work. On the flip side of it, being able to get yourself even £50 a unit extra. Now, if you're a 500 car retail outlet, so per annum, so let's say you sell 40 to 50 cars a year, and you're getting yourself an extra £50 per unit profit over the course of the year. That's a big number.
Yeah.
That's a big number. So for every 50 quid, so every bit of fuel that somebody chucks in, every set of mats that you might chuck in on a deal, every bit of extra marketing that you do here and there, what's it bringing and how much? So, you know, an easy, quick sum from, let's look at it from a marketing perspective before we move on to an overhead perspective, is to say, right, okay, I've spent £5,000 this month, and let's just call it 10, I've done 10 deals. Well, that's like, whoa, holy crap. You know, this is £500 a bonnet to do a deal. Never mind our margin and our VAT and our prep cost, you know, so they're the basic sort of, that's the basic sort of overview that you should take. And if you get it down to, say, you know, somewhere between £300 and £350, how can I get it down to £300? How can I now squeeze it down to £275? What's working, what's not? And then £25 and £50 per unit, depending on how much volume. Well, regardless of the situation, you know, if you do 100 cars in a year, so just shy of 10 a month, you know, £50, it's £5,000.
It's nice holiday or half holiday these days. I've just booked one. The price was ridiculous. But the other side of that is it's then building it back up, isn't it? You know, like, so if I spend this much on marketing, what margin can I make? Different platforms have different margins, and different cars should be on different platforms. And, you know, a lot of what we spoke about over the last 6 weeks seems to be time consuming, but as long as your time's allocated towards making money, that's okay. You know, and you should be spending that time to do that exercise. It's really important to understand this number.
Yeah, and it is, and I think, you know, we get asked a lot about, well, what do we see as acquisitional cost, and how do I work that out? And, you know, I think for anybody that's watching or listening to this now, the easiest thing to do straight away is to look at exactly where you're spending your money on your marketing. So if you've got an Auto Trader budget, an eBay budget, Car Guru's budget, social media budget, and the list can go on. Wherever you've got your budget, go and get the total or the average spend that you've spent over the last 3 to 6 months and break that down into a monthly spend. Go back over them months and work out how many vehicles you have sold and divide that amount by the vehicles that you've sold. So the total amount per month divided by the vehicles that you've sold gives you an acquisitional cost of X, Y, and Z to do a deal.
Yeah.
Now, the other part comes into understanding how much profit per unit you've got. And that's understanding what actually is your net margin after you've paid your VAT. And then obviously you go into normal business running. We're not teaching anyone how to suck eggs, but your general overhead. But if you want to get a good understanding of and breakdown of what is costing you what it is actually costing you in marketing to do a deal, and then you need to granulate that and go to the platforms to see how many deals you're doing from each platform. I don't think everyone really, and it can be difficult, has a track on where that deal came from. You want to know where you want to be spending your money. If you're spending $3,000 a month with Auto Trader and you've done 6 deals, that's cost you 500 quid a deal. Well, you're spending $3,000 in your social media strategy and you pay for, and you've done 20 deals. Well, actually, what's that telling you? Or it could be the other way around, and not just, in case Auto Trader's watching this Auto Trader or listening to this, you could get a better result from Auto Trader.
I'm going to defend Auto Trader. It's when people go to that, like, oh, I'm not paying Auto Trader because it costs me $3,000 a month. And don't get me wrong, I'm the first to say the way the prices have increased has been, horrendous over the years. But it's easy to go, oh, I'm not going to go on Auto Trader. I'm going to go on half the cost to go on 3 other platforms. But then you got the hassle of uploading through 3 other platforms and you sell less cars. Or what about if you can sell 10 cars through Auto Trader and the rest is kind of like adding on, but you wouldn't have sold those first 10 cars unless you were on Auto Trader, because that's where the buyers were. And it is getting that balance sometimes.
It is exactly that. It's understanding how much you're spending, where it's coming from. And the other thing then, what you can go into is a little bit more granular, is once you've done that exercise and you're doing X amount of deals with Auto Trader, you're doing X through your social paid for, you're doing X through Cargo or wherever it may be, you can then go into your deals and say, okay, Auto Trader, I did 10 deals with, and they returned me, all them deals made 15 grand, let's say. We netted 15 grand profit per unit after our costs, right? I did 10 deals through another platform and they actually netted me 10. So we've done the same amount of deals, which means the acquisitional cost is the same, but sometimes different platforms can deliver better results in terms of profit.
Yeah.
So they're the things that you can look at. And, it sounds like it's a lot of work when actually, in essence, it's not. And if you are a big number retailer, well, hopefully you've got the processes in place that is actually saying where the vehicles or where your customer, has actually come from. And you should be able to run a report and work that out each month. If you're not big number retailer, it's fairly simple and a good code of practice. If you're wondering where your traffic and where your marketing is best spent, is to go and get the last 3 to 6 months and just spend a little bit of time out of your day. Like we've said before, if you're spending time, you don't think you've got time, but it's on about where you're making the money in the business, because we're all guilty of that. I certainly have been in the past, where we just get obstructed by following what needs to be done. Go and grab a bit of that time, sit it down, look where the money's being spent, and follow the process of getting your acquisitional costs, but also go a bit more granular and look at the platform and how much them platforms are delivering you in terms of profit.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's just a worthwhile exercise to do, especially when people go, it's quiet. Use your time wisely and get ready for when it's busy again, because
Yeah.
it always comes back. That's going off subject again, but I've heard a lot of people have said to me recently, it's really quiet, Nick. Is everyone saying the same? And I'm saying, yeah, generally. Why? Everyone's asking why. Well, the macro factors that are making it quiet are fairly obvious. But the fundamentals of supply and demand should mean it's still busy. There's less cars out there. It's not easy to buy them. So prices should still be stable, and people, if they want a car, should be willing to pay a premium. So it will come back. It's just a case of when. So, prepare for that and be ready to use your money wisely, because maybe your money is going to be a bit more limited because you've had a few tough months.
Exactly that. It's definitely going on out there, Nick, from the sounds of it, from what everyone's experiencing. That pretty much wraps us up for this week. Do you reckon?
Yeah.
Obviously, if anyone's got any questions, they can contact myself or Nick. We're always contactable. If you've got any subjects that you'd like to be covered on the podcast, that'd be great. We have got a guest next week. We'll get the info out for you on that. And if you are looking to come on, and you've got any feedback that you can give our community, and any advice, we'd really appreciate it. And obviously, if you're not already, go to the Facebook group Motor Trade Talk. If you're within the motor industry, you can join the group. And if you can, make sure you like, subscribe, and share if you're watching on YouTube, and the same on our podcast, because it does really help us when we're doing this. So it really helps us be able to make the weekly podcast and reach the people that we need to reach.
Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll be back next week.
Speak to you soon.
Take care.